Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Oh, well, blessings, everyone. This is Jerry Teo with Healing Generations Podcast and the Healing Generations Institute, brought to you by National Compadres Network in conjunction with the Brotherhood of Elders. And we want to welcome you today to this podcast. And as we do every time, we thank you so much for being here. And as we begin, we want to begin by acknowledging Creator and all the ancestors, your ancestors, all the ancestors that have come before us, that have really provided us an avenue, a way, given us the teachings, the lessons, the blessings, the traditions, the values, but also left us some work to do because, we recognize that those ancestors also struggled like we struggle today. And the residual of that, sits with us. And so part of this Healing Generations is bringing forward the blessings and the medicines of our ancestors, but also doing the work to heal the past hurt that sits with us in the present too. We want to acknowledge the people of your land, wherever you're sitting. I'm on the Tongva Gaprileno land, and acknowledge those folks and the relatives there, and invite you to think about and pray and acknowledge and bring the spirit of those relatives of the land you sit. And then also acknowledge the people in the neighborhood, the barrio, the hood, that all those folks that carry the spirit and carry the vibe of that neighborhood and the blessings that they carry, but also let's lift up maybe in this hour, maybe some healing for the wounds that they carry too. And we think about your families and you individually. And that's what we do this for, to contribute to that in a good way and the best way we can. We're really on this journey, really to offer this to the next 7 generations so that our children and grandchildren can have more blessings and know who they are and be proud of who they are, but also have the wherewithal to deal with life's struggles that way. And today, really, really blessed, really pleased to invite in, to be in dialogue with, I consider him a nephew, I consider him a brother, a colleague, a noted writer, author, playwright, creative. He's got his intellectual stuff, got his bachelor's and master's and all that stuff because he's done his work. But also, received a lot of accolades, along the way. Doris Duke Performing Artist Award, a Creative Capital Award for We Have Ire that he produced recently. Corazón del Barrio for Excellence in Poetry, Latino Heritage Local Hero Award, and many others, many others. But I'm talking, about Paul Flores, and he just, to me, a really good friend, a really good camarada, a really good partner. I'll just lift up, also in his poetry and his spitting of words, part of that Deaf Poetry Jam. He's known for that. And we're hoping he's going to spit some stuff for us, share some stuff for us today. He's got a new book out that we're going to talk about as well. But, Paul, I just want to thank you for who you are, what you've done, in terms of being a voice of our community and a really good friend and a partner along this journey. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure to see you again, Jerry. It's been a long time. I was listening to the podcast, so I've been really happy to hear your voice on the podcast and a couple of the other brothers who've been on there, Francisco, and hearing the teachings. And I'm really proud that you guys are making this Healing Generations podcast feel really reflective of the Círculo. So thank you. Thank you for bringing me through again.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and it's all part of the journey. We've been doing this work together in communities, for many years now, working with youth, working with families, but also working with the world to bring a sense of awareness. And I know that, you being here now, getting ready to release a new book, all of that has come with a journey. And I'd like to begin by just inviting you to share a little bit about Paul Flores, who you are, where you come from, your people, and that, that journey.
My first language is love. When my mother spoke Spanish to me, I was her mijo. I was her querido. I was her amor. My mother's Spanish saved me from loneliness, saved me from feeling sorry for myself when I felt embarrassed to explain my name when people asked me, where are you from? When they asked me, what are you? When I said I was Mexican, when I said I was Cuban, when people looked at me like that, when I smiled back, and when they understood that I was loved, that I was not alone, that Spanish is my mother, mis tías, my grandmother, mi abuelita, ay, qué lindo. My mother's voice was so wonderful to hear, so I never felt alone. Spanish is my mother tongue, but my first language is love. And when my mother spoke Spanish to me, I was her mijo, her querido, her amor. Spanish was our private blood language battling forced assimilation. My mother's Spanish lives where my blood rushes between Tolteca and Conquistador, dreams and world war. Deep in my heart, they sound the same. Isli in your face and heart. I look back and bring forth what's good, cara y corazón, courage and tenderness. I leave the pain of past generations behind, and I find the courage to go on. My mother was a healer. When my teammate fell on the second base path, dirt collecting in his tears, he couldn't move his ankle. Me duele el tobillo, he said. My teammates, coaches, parents all called for my mother to translate. She became a healer. My mother learned to love a white man and even taught him Spanish también. Spanish is my mother tongue. My first language is love. Mutation out of fragmentation. My mother's Spanish was a kaleidoscope. My identity became poetry. I turned in my rosary for a Spanglish mandala of hope. My mother's tongue is Spanish. My first language is love. So that's a little poem that was dedicated to Jerry Tello in my new book. That's called We Still Be. And it's called My First Language is Love. And I wanted to use it as a way to open up a little bit of a conversation about not only how close I am to my mother and my mother's side, and I was raised by a single mom, but also like just how everything that I bring forth as a mentor to other young folks, all the kind of love that I bring forward in giving or helping or assisting or, encouraging, because that's a lot of it too. All of that element that I bring to my work with young folks comes from my mom. She loved me unconditionally. And I feel like that's a superpower. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like having felt unconditional love is probably the thing that helped me survive, growing up, being a young brown male in the United States. I think without that unconditional love, I probably would not be here talking to you right now, Jerry. So I wanted to just kind of introduce my mom that way as the big influence in my life and where I'm from.
Yeah. Powerful, brother. What a powerful poem, and felt your spirit, felt your mom join us. And a lot of our moms, that loved us through it all.
Yeah.
In spite of, our craziness, our pendejadas, our doubt, our shame, our moms many times loved us through it all,
Yeah.
But I know, that journey, that journey was not a straight journey. It was a journey of ups and downs, like all of us, and so where were you born, and how did you get to the Bay, you're in San Francisco now. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I was originally from Chula Vista, California, which is on the border, a couple miles from Tijuana.
Yeah.
I was raised there by my mother. She came from Chicago when she was a teenager to have me. And she came out here from the Chicago area to live with her older sister who had moved here after she graduated high school and moved to San Diego, actually. And then, she had me. Then almost all my mom's brothers and sisters left the Chicago area and moved to San Diego. So for the first 4 or 5 years of my life, I was living with my mom and my grandparents and my uncles and my aunts. My mom had me when she was 18. So, there's still a lot of growing for my mom to do. She needed a lot of help. So she stuck close to her family. And I was raised that way. I was raised with my mother's family, which is a very half Cuban, half Mexican family. And there wasn't a lot of Cubans in San Diego, but there was plenty of Mexicanos, But see, my grandmother was the one that was, I was, with her all the time when my mom was at work and whatnot. So a lot of my Spanish sounds Cuban, but then if you mix it with the way you speak Spanish in the border, all of a sudden I come out sounding Puerto Rican. It's really funny. So that's where I grew up. My mom, was really supportive of whatever my ambitions were. And as a youngster, I wanted to be a ball player. My mom's brothers and even my grandmother from Cuba, she was big into baseball. In fact, her favorite player was Fernando Valenzuela from the Dodgers. And, my grandmother would even throw the ball with me, believe it or not, man. Wow. You know what I'm saying? She could throw and catch the ball a little bit. And I started playing baseball very young. And I didn't know how important sports would be for me because eventually, with my mother's support, I ended up signing a professional baseball contract playing with Chicago Cubs. And they ended up paying for my college. So wow. I ended up going to UC San Diego. And at UC San Diego, I really kind of began to realize that my calling wasn't sports, which is interesting because I had only ever wanted to be a professional athlete. And I was very influenced by my uncles who were all really athletic. And when I was at UC San Diego, I just kind of I fell in with a couple people that I thought were really interesting, who took a lot of chances. And then I got mentored by some folks who also were really important in, showing me the path towards being a professional writer. So, I started working with a gentleman named Quincy Troop and another gentleman named Victor Hernandez Cruz. Both of them were my teachers at UC San Diego, and they were very much in the performing element of poetry. They were like what you would call declaimers, people who would stand up and be like, "Rah, here's my poem." Yeah. And that's how they would teach class too. It would be like half the class was, "Quincy, can you just read poems?" And he would just perform poems, or Victor, performing poems. And that was a big influence for me. So then I started really pursuing that way of writing, which was intended to connect with people live. That's the idea of the poetry I write. I use it as a communication form, as a way to build community, as a way to identify who's like me, as a way to bring people together. So then I started hanging out with this guy named Adrian Arancibia from the Taco Shop Poets. Yeah. And we started doing small things at UC San Diego. And then by 95, I moved to San Francisco to do graduate studies in creative writing. I wanted to publish a book, a novelist. So I came to San Francisco, didn't know anybody. I didn't know anyone in San Francisco, but I had chosen to go to San Francisco instead of Brooklyn College, instead of New York, because I was really committed to California. I thought I saw myself here. I saw myself a California artist, somebody who really wanted to build with other folks from the West. For whatever reason, man, I had multiple opportunities to move to New York and I never did. Because I just felt like this is my land, this is my soil, this is my people. I just felt closer here. I don't know why, but that helped me kind of feel like I was where I belonged, even though I was in San Francisco and didn't know a ton of people. And then I go to school, start going to school, and there was 200 people in my creative writing program at San Francisco State. 3 of them were Chicano. So of course they see me and it's all of a sudden, okay, let's get this guy and, bring him into our little crew. So I met the other 3 Chicanos that were there. And then next thing you know, we made a little group called Los Delicados. And we decided, out of our own kind of survival mechanism, but also out of our own kind of desire to hear the poetry that we weren't hearing around us, we started creating a group. And it was a performing group. And it was a group that mixed, poetry, music, teatro. And we had a Nicaraguan guy, a Chicano guy, and then me in the group. We were from San Francisco, San Diego, and San Bernardino. And then our drummer was a Filipino cat from San Jose. And Los Delicados kind of were a very kind of free form thing, was get your voice out, talk about your community. And we wrote this poem, Presentes, which were basically just short poems about people who had passed on that we want to bring them back in. So it was like a community-based poem. We would describe somebody who might have passed and then say their name. And then at the end, we'd all say, Presente. And we did that everywhere we would go, all the community events. We would do it at different poetry slams and stuff like that. And then we started writing more collective poems. And I really got into the I really got into the idea of being a part of an ensemble, part of being in a group. I liked collectivity versus kind of like the individualism of writing a novel. I felt like I did that. I wrote a book. I wrote my first novel about growing up on the border called Along the Border Lies. And I didn't really like the process. I felt like it needed to be more integrated with other voices, other people. For me to be myself, I felt like I needed to be around others. So working with Los Delicados allowed me to feel stronger in a group, find my voice, find my place, be more of a giver, right? So I felt like that introduction, we would tour through, Fresno. That's how we met Juan Felipe Herrera, was through Los Delicados, and got mentored by Juan Felipe Herrera for a couple of years. Wow. And Juan Felipe is all over the place. Juan's about, what do you got in your head right now? Let's go, jam it, right? And improvisation was a big deal. And then as we started touring through the nation, I started meeting other poets, other writers from other states, other ethnicities, seeing folks from Texas, seeing folks from Chicago, seeing folks from New York and Miami, and meeting these other poetry scenes. This is in the 90s. And spoken word was really taking off. Yeah, folks were getting big. And so that's where I kind of started seeing, okay, I see that there is a path as a performing poet, a spoken word artist, as they may call it. They get people from HBO saw me. I think this was around 2000, 2001. They asked me to submit a tape. I submitted a tape. They brought me up to the show at HBO Def Poetry. I met a bunch of other artists from all over the nation. And from there, I kind of just took off. I started touring all those places, many of them Latino based. So like I would be in Miami a ton, Houston a bunch, Portland a lot, New York all the time, and working with a combination of Latino based cultural organizations and youth. So, I would be doing after school programming for kids, teaching them how to write poems and perform poems, kids like ages 9 to 15.
Wow.
And then I would be in the juvenile halls because I was Latino and a male. A lot of folks saw me as someone with a good example, a story to share for young people who have been through some issues, right? And I found myself, in juvenile halls working with young people, mostly Latino or Black, and, sharing my poems with them, and then trying to figure out how to get them to write. And then not only feeling empowered by their writing, but then how do they stand up and share and get confidence in their voice from that? And I feel like I had to spend about a couple of years over in the Youth Guidance Center at San Francisco, YGC, which is closed now, just working on that type of relationship with young people. Like, how do you really get to them without like trying to say, I'm the expert, I can teach you. It's more about how do you connect with young folks. That taught me a lot about being myself, because they weren't in there trying to listen to a teacher. They wanted someone that they could build trust with. And I felt like, I learned how to be myself, to represent who I really was. And then the authentic elements of my personality came out, not as a teacher necessarily, but as a human. And sometimes, I would be walking the streets over in San Francisco on Valencia or Mission, and all of a sudden there'd be a group of fellas, young fellas, got their gear on, showing their colors a little bit. And I would walk by and one guy would be like, hey, ain't you that poet dude from YGC? They would recognize me from having seen them in juvie, and they'd be, hey man, do a poem for us. It was funny to be recognized, that sometimes that does happen. So I feel like a lot of my journey often is about just kind of like always remembering where I come from, being very authentic with who I am, remembering that, whatever accolades or levels of achievement I make, that's not the most important thing. What's the most important thing is the whole reason why I started doing poetry was connect to people, which was to hear stories and share stories. And I think that's just kind of like the road I'm on. Whatever medium I'm doing it in, whether it's the classroom, whether it's the poetry event, whether it's Circolo, whether it's mentoring young folks, whether it's in the office or the, the meeting room. It's all about communication, connecting with folks and being authentic, telling stories, hearing stories, being present in those moments. A lot of what you've showed us, Jerry. So thank you again for setting an example for us how to listen well.
Mm. Wow. Thank you, brother. And you kind of rolled through some stuff there that are really, really big stuff. I
Yeah,
mean,
a lot of big stuff.
being on Deaf Poetry Jam and traveling all across the country, working with youth, speaking truth and representing our people, is are big accomplishments, man. And I say accomplishments in the sense of that you moved into a realm that not a lot of us get the opportunity to do. As a Mexicano, Cubano, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of challenges too. You trying to navigate all of that. It hasn't been easy. And we know as an artist, just surviving, just making enough money to survive and staying in the creative is a challenge in itself. How has that challenged you? And what was that challenge along the way, being, a brown man, growing up, trying to really, as you said, bring the medicine, bring the teachings, bring that sense of identity, but I'm sure along the way, many, many challenges. And tell us about some of those challenges and what got you through that, man.
I think the first challenge was for me to be honest about who I really wanted to be. I think I had a childhood dream about being a ball player that was really based on being a child. That was a vision of myself from my childhood. And once I had achieved that, and then I got hurt, and then I got cut, I had to figure out, like, okay, is this really the dream that I have? So in other words, when you have these childhood dreams that then get rerouted, are you sticking to them because you feel like that's who you've always been, or do you, break that down a little bit and ask yourself, where is this desire coming from? So there was a moment when I was going to college and playing ball at the same time. And I would, play ball and then go in the off season, go to college. And as I was in that transition, this is when I was about 21, I started realizing that maybe being a ball player wasn't what I really wanted to be. Stepping out of that identity was tough. I think that was one of my first big challenges. I mean, there were many other challenges, but I feel like, starting to become a man by taking, accountability for your palabra and things like that. Like, I feel like leaving behind being a ball player was a little tough for me because I always felt like that was my identity. I wanted to be an athlete, and I had built that in San Diego. I built my whole life around being an athlete. And when I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and I decided I wanted to be an artist, and I really wanted to get into cultural identity, and I wanted to research where I was from, and I wanted to, bring that forward. A lot of people looked at me like I was pretending. Because aren't you an athlete? Aren't you a baseball player? What are you doing reading books? What do you mean you write poetry? What kind of gay stuff is that? There was a lot of that, a lot of homophobia. There was a lot of, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's weird how sometimes in our community, when we don't understand things, especially for men, it becomes a challenge to fit that into a box. And so automatically people defer to homophobic stuff. So I feel like, I was raised that way too in a lot of ways. So overcoming kind of those insecurities that we related to homophobia is really weird, thinking about that growth. Especially because then I moved to San Francisco, which is like, the Mecca for gay folks, where acceptance is number one. And I didn't, coming to San Francisco was probably my second big challenge was asking myself, this place really challenges who I am. I wanted to be an artist, but there's so much more about that in San Francisco. Moving away from your hometown was a challenge for me, because I didn't know anybody, but I didn't understand the culture of San Francisco entirely either. San Francisco is very different from San Diego. The expectations, the common knowledge base is very different. I remember just spending the first year or two just kind of shocked every time I would go out, and just trying to adjust to some of the things I was seeing in San Francisco, whether it was the, in-your-face politics, constant protesting, constant organizing that was happening, new struggles that I had to be aware of all of a sudden, very internationalist to, what is gentrification? What does that mean? Why is that so important right now? And, why is it affecting my folks the most? Why are Latinos getting displaced? What does that mean? How did they get displaced? What's displacement mean? So all of these things, moving into a new place challenged me to figure out not only where I fit, but what I felt about some of these new issues that apparently were going to be important to me. I think the other main challenges that I grew up was, as I was getting older, was how to maintain a family and be an artist. I think that was probably, that's really a lot about the inspiration of my book, We Still Be. I had taken a retreat sorry to kind of backtrack. I took a retreat with Jimmy Santiago Baca out in New Mexico. And I participated in his 3 or 4 day writing retreat. And he really wants you to go deep into your, childhood. He wants you to go deep into those dark things that you try to forget. And he wants you to bring them out. And he would send us on night hikes. He would send us on night hikes and say, for an hour or two every night while you're here, I want you to walk out. We were at the Ghost Ranch and Georgia O'Keeffe's old ranch. And there was paved paths, but it was nighttime. But since there was no clouds, you could see the stars and the moon and stuff. So he's like, I want you to record your thoughts while you walk around at night here. All right. Record what comes to your mind and then write poems out of that. So for 3 days, I started doing that. And what came out was I had recently been divorced, and I started remembering what it was like when my mom remarried the first time. And so I started thinking about the relationship of kind of like family in who I was, how family had influenced me. And when you're going through divorce, you're really reflective about how did this happen? I've got 2 children now that are not going to be living with their mom and dad at the same time. It was really rough, So I was comparing the 2 experiences of being a child of divorce and getting divorced. So those things really started hitting at me and bringing up memories. And, one of the biggest challenges to being a touring artist, like I was explaining to you, going all over the world, that hasn't stopped. I still am moving around a lot. My children have gotten older, but it's hard to hold down a relationship that way. So a lot of the struggles in my life became around, how do I prioritize the people I love and give them all of my attention, at the same time, give enough time for me to create the work that I'm meant to create here, the plays, the poems, the productions, the tours. I didn't want to sacrifice that anymore because I'm solid in my identity. But at the same time, it's hard to choose how to spend your time.
Thank you. Thank you, brother, for being so vulnerable and sharing, what many people will not share, that journey of identity, of our identity, but also when we're exposed to other people's identity that we haven't been accustomed to, and we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that, as men. We don't talk about that as raza. We don't talk about that very much. Our own journey of when we got exposed and said, whoa, what's going on here? How does that make me feel? Where do I fit in? But the other part that's really not talked about is, a lot as an artist, those that are artists, they're poets, that are singers, that are performers, and you travel. I travel a lot in my own work too, is how do you maintain the relationships that you love? And you started out sharing a poem about your mom loving you unconditionally, right? And how as a man do you unconditionally love your children, but also love yourself and your creativity? I mean, that the balance of that is often difficult and heart-wrenching. And then, reflecting back on what you said in terms of you being a ball player, because that was your identity. And when I think about it now, that's the way life goes. We get given a path and we think, okay, this is our path for life. And then life shows up and say, nope, hey, guess what? You ain't on this. I mean, and we can keep trying to do that. But the more we try and do that, you can say, well, okay, I'm not going to be a ball player. And say, yeah, I am. And then you get hurt. And life's saying, no, you're not. This has served you up to now. We need you on a different path. And all of us go through that. All of us go through thinking, wow, this is what I'm going to do. And then life shows up and says, nope, we got something else for you to do here. Now, whether we pay attention to that or not is big, because we don't pay attention to that, we struggle. And when we begin to pay attention, that Creator, we talk about ancestors all the time, but do we pay attention to the ancestors when they say, guess what? Paul, we need you on this different path. We need you to really struggle with your identity so you can then talk about how other people struggle with their identity. So what's inside of them maybe will come out. And not all of us have the ability to go to to a retreat with, Jimmy Santiago Baca, and we travel the night, but we travel the night, and you see those youngsters in the night struggling with who am I, what am I, and so, your poetry and your journey and your openness, really reflects what many of us go through and what many of our youngsters go through, and many of us, even as adults, go through, So I want to appreciate you for bringing that journey to light, bringing through your words, through your, poetry, through your performance. And, one of the places where I got, after we had, you had gone through some training with us in Joven Lobe and began to work that, where I got a little bit closer to you was with Placas, the play that you did. Talk a little bit about that, because that was a really profound play that, that I was able to, really see and feel. And then we were able to do some healing around círculos related to that. Yeah.
That always reminds me of a very pivotal time in my life. It's also a very beautiful time in my life. I think Placas was a blessing that was, wrapped in the disguise of serious challenges and pain. Placas started in 2009 by me collaborating with Carecen, the Central American Resource Center here in San Francisco, during a moment when the mayor of our city, Mayor Gavin Newsom, decided to suspend the sanctuary city policy to protect immigrants because of a gang problem. Because not only that, but because there was a lot of right-wing kind of pressure on San Francisco to, deal with supposed gang members, particularly Central American gang members, Salvadoran, Honduran gang members that they were saying were putting our citizenry at risk. So some resources were pulled from tattoo removal services. Tattoo removal being one way for folks to start over if they've been caught up in, neighborhood violence, and, to get rid of their tattoos so they could go get a job, or they could, walk safely in pursuit of their, making their family better. When those resources got pulled, one of the solutions was to remind people how important it was to support folks who were trying to change their lives, who were trying to find the healing, you know what I mean? Who were looking for the medicine,
That's right.
but didn't always have the know-how or where to go get it. So Carecen asked me to write a play about the folks going through tattoo removal. Not only tattoo removal, but the whole therapy, which is also where I really got exposed to mental health work for Latino folks who had been through, street violence. Yeah. And so that's where I met Alex Sanchez. Alex Sanchez was a consultant on this project called Placas, which was about the tattoos that folks wear and the process of removing them and what that really is like for particularly people who were caught up in neighborhood violence or were part of a set. So I was not part of that. I didn't grow up with gangs. I wasn't in a set. Alex was my teacher around what all that meant. And so Alex has got a lot of experience, being a part of the life himself, having, changed his life to help other young folks come through it. He was my guide. So he took me on all these trips to meet people who had been impacted by neighborhood violence and showed me, really how it wasn't just about little neighborhoods. It was about a much larger issue around immigration, around U.S. intervention, around resources, around racism, around corrupt governments, and not having a will to want to support the young folks caught up in this stuff, which was an example of why we started in the first place, this project. Right. We wanted to humanize the people who were going through tattoo removal. So I interviewed about 100 folks, 100, people caught up in gangs, people who serviced gangs, people who were in the medical profession, therapists, family members who had lost their children to gun violence, attended a few funerals, looked at, what were the systemic issues around supporting. The majority were men. Majority were young men. Majority of them were suffering a couple of different traumas, including family separations, mothers leaving children to go to the United States, them catching up, trying to reconnect after 5, 6, 7 years of being separated, the trauma in that, feeling abandoned. And so we started collecting all these stories, right? And I was interviewing people as they were getting their tattoos removed or right after.
Wow.
So a lot of it was questions around, what tattoo you having removed? How come? Can you talk about that? And, the process of removing the tattoo really gets into the process of why did you get the tattoo in the first place?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the tattoos were kind of like a real easy device to tell the story of people caught up in this. That became the basis for writing this play, Placas, about a Salvadoran father who was trying to get his life back together by leaving the gang and taking his tattoos down. And then when he comes back from jail after 9 years, he realizes his son is caught up in the enemy gang. And so there's all this like challenge about fathers and sons, how the systems kind of don't always support families, particularly immigrant families, brown, Spanish-speaking, bilingual families. So yeah, we toured that all over.
Right.
And I think a lot of the work that we did with you, Jerry, was based on like, okay, here's the play, the representation of what's really going on. And then with you, we actually got into the room with the people who were impacted, who were real live folks that were, going through this right now, maybe were on probation or just got out of prison, or the police. Remember how many police captains we brought into those circles?
Right.
And, letting the folks speak directly to the police, right? So we had kids in there who had maybe just been arrested 2 weeks ago, and now we're out, and now they're talking to the police captain or his lieutenant that arrested them. Mm-hmm. This was before we were really thinking about restorative justice. I think this was more about healing justice, right?
Right.
And then there was that one moment, right, where I believe the judge who sentenced one of the kids was in that circle. Yeah. And there was a lot of tension in that circle. I remember because you had a judge there who had put some of these kids behind bars, and the kid got up and said, "Can I hug you?" And I remember in that circle, the judge said, "Yeah." And that was in Fresno. And
yeah, I remember.
So that's the work we were doing in community together. And I felt like that's the type of work I like doing. I like gathering the community participation and creating the play and the ideas that we want to use to solve or support our needs in the community versus always waiting for people on top to do things.
Right.
We create the change.
And what I really appreciate about your work and many others that are doing this work is people don't realize the healing that goes on, because through placas and other things, and I've seen it through poetry and through music and through, other avenues, the real healing that begins to cultivate, and I saw it there. We saw it in Círculos. We saw it in communities. We saw it in community dialogues after. We saw it in many avenues, and it came out of that floricanto, that creativity. And, and it's beautiful because you were guided by community. You were guided by folks that experienced this. But, all of that really leads to that place of healing and restoration, And I know that your life journey has been about that, I know it's been about that in the creative sense, about, really that sense of identity, that sense of struggle, but that sense of healing. And, and I really appreciate that about you. And, I'm really excited also to read your book, because I know you got a new book. I want you to talk about your present work right now, a little bit about your present work, because I think especially those young people that are out there, listening, that have this creative sense in them to write, to speak, to spit words, to sing, I really want them to be inspired. Because life's journey is not a straight path. Sometimes it just comes out of spirit. Sometimes you got something to say. Yes. Sometimes the community's got to hear something, and you just gotta put it out there. And so tell us about your present work and what you're doing right now and how you're moving further along this path.
I think you're absolutely right. I think most of the work that I do comes from that passion, that spirit. Like, I got something to say. I need to say it. I'm going to find the venue. I'm going to find the space for it to be heard. But what's most important is to get the message out, to get the story out, get the voice out. So I feel like that's the number one thing that gets me moving, is having a feeling, having a stirring inside you to want to express, to bring it out, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're like a professional at it or whether you're getting published, That's the whole reason I went to the open mics, or not even the open mics. When I first started doing a lot of this, we would just go to a popular corner and just start doing stuff.
Yeah.
that's what I learned in San Francisco that I didn't see as much of in San Diego, was just kind of the willing to be public, to go out and say, this is what I feel. Anyway, the work I'm doing now is, I got a lot of work. I always got a lot of projects going, support a lot of different people. I think the biggest thing I have right now is that my book's about to be published in a week, August 18th. My first book of poetry is coming out on El Martillo Press, which is a new press out of Los Angeles, really focusing on what they would call working class poetry, poetry that speaks to the people, that's motivated by connecting the folks, real stories. So they connected to me. So that's Matt Cedillo and David Romero, two really generous brothers. They hit me up about a year and a half or two ago, asking if I was interested in publishing a book of my poetry, and I don't normally publish my poems because what I feel my job is to be is that person who performs live. That's what everything I write for is to be able to share live in the moment, to make the most of our time together. I don't always write with the imagination of you reading my book. I kind of got away from that when I stopped writing the novels. But I had so much work over 20 years plus of being a poet that I was ready to publish, I think. Right. And that's the other thing, man, is it took me, I got my MFA in creative writing in 2000. It took me 23 years to publish a book of poetry, right? Being a poet all that time and then some. So I do think there is no straight line to your artwork or to your purpose all the time. It takes a very different route sometimes. Right. And so I've been working on this book, just putting it together. Then I've been touring it, promoting it. It's called We Still Be. In the process of putting the book together, I started working with this guy named John Zhang. He's a piano player, Chinese piano player up here in San Francisco, born and raised in Chinatown. And he invited me to collaborate on a project that was music and jazz, comparing just different immigration experiences, incarceration experiences between Asian and Latino. And we wrote this album together called Cages. It's called Cages, but I forgot what the subtitle is. And a big section of that album became the last section of this book, which was looking really at what has been going on within our communities, Asian and brown communities. So, We Still Be is the title of the book. It's also the title poem. And that poem was inspired by a friend of mine, Norman Celaya, when his house burned down. And we it was tough. This was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And it was just one of those landlords that was negligent about the place. And we did this fundraiser for him. We raised money so he could get a new place, right? And it just kind of was a metaphor for me of we don't let our people, just kind of dangle in the wind, that we work hard to stay connected, to support, to remind folks that we don't go easily out, just because my house burns down doesn't mean I'm going to leave the mission or the neighborhood. Just because of the kind of negligent landlords that don't want to, support our living needs doesn't mean we're going to leave our communities, right? So the idea of We Still Be is that we're still here in San Francisco, despite how expensive it is, how technological, despite how all the rumors about the San Francisco, our barrio is still here. We're still here supporting each other. And that's what We Still Be is about.
Yeah, and we'll have some information to share, the podcast about getting the book and connecting with you as well. But, I really like that despite and in spite of, I've been writing about that, in spite of, because we have to live in spite of what the racism, the oppression, the gentrification, the continued barrage on our people. In spite of that, how do we choose to live our life? And I want to come back to your mom, because I'm sure she struggled and I'm sure she had a tough time. And in spite of that, she loved the hell out of you. In spite of what she went through, she loved Paul. And in spite of that, she loved you the way you were, And so, our moms, give us these teachings, that really guide us throughout. And we sometimes go down this crooked road, to try and find it, but it comes back to that, in spite of. everything that's been put on us, how do we love ourselves? How do we love our people? How do we love everybody? Even the ones that we don't get along with. How do we have some compassion for their ignorance, if you will, sometimes, and I think that's what, that's to me what you have lifted up in your work, in the time that I've known you, working with you and all of that. And I'm looking forward maybe to do some stuff together, as we, go on this next phase of life. I want to ask you one last question. And in terms of, you're now, been doing this a long time, brother, get on the older elder.
I'm 50 now. So,
You're getting there, man. You're getting there. But I want just, for young people that are thinking about going down this path, what advice would you give them? One word of advice that you would give them as they're, trying to speak and share and be creative in the world? What would you say to them?
I think I already heard this on the podcast earlier, and I think you may have said this already, is surround yourself with the right people. I think this is not a journey that's done best on your own. I think, when you are going to be in the creative side, and you feel like you got to turn on your creativity at the drop of a hat, I got to make a poem today, or I got to write a play today, or I got to write a new song today. And that can be a lot of pressure. It can be a ton of pressure. And what constantly keeps me motivated, what keeps me sane, is being around people who share a passion for that creativity equal to mine. And I'm not talking about how much they've accomplished. I'm talking about their practice. Are they practicing their work? Are they out there doing what they say? They say they're a poet. Are they making poems? Are they at the poetry readings? Are they talking about their work with others? Are they trying to put together events? And those are the people that I surround myself with, people who practice. They always keep me, sharp. The other thing I wanted to say is keep the concept of success directed differently. I was asked this recently, do I feel successful at this point? And what I said was, no, I don't think I'm as successful as you guys think or imagine, because I don't measure success in publications or performances or money or accolades. I measure in whether I'm balanced or not. Do I feel balanced? Wow. And at the moment, I work too much, sleep too little, have a lot of concerns and responsibilities that keep me up late at night. And there's things I've got to put together and, work on balancing my life, balancing my spirit, balancing my emotions the best that I can. So to me, I was like, I'm thinking of that retirement time. I want to be feeling good when I get to retire. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to. My health is very important to me, and I feel like a balanced life is success. So when I can give as much time and heart to my family as much as my work, and right now I think it's a little unbalanced, and so I feel like that's something else to still look at. Sometimes success isn't just clout on Instagram, or you got a #1 bestseller, or you made a movie. Success, can be a lot of different things. Find what it is for you. I think that's a big thing, because don't just take success as something that someone else determines for you. It's good to be around those people that are pushing hard to get their stuff out, their work out. They'll help you determine what success is, but then it's also you. You have to figure out, what am I doing this for? What do I get out of it? And this is a way for me to just remind young people that if this is the road you take, the creative side, there's not a lot of guarantees. Right. Poets and artists usually don't get health insurance. So one thing would be how can you get health insurance and still be a creative? That's another thing to think about. How do you get the healing integrated into your life?
Well, I think that's profound, brother. I mean, we talk about how do you keep the healing in your creative. How do you stay balanced? And that being part of that journey of success. And I appreciate your openness about that, because it is a journey. And I want to lift that up to people, because we all have that creative sense in us. So however we express that creativeness, right? Our walk is a rhythm. Our talk, is a rhyme. Our whole sense of the way we do things becomes the poetry of our ancestors. And whether it becomes something of tragedy or of beauty, we have in our hands. And sometimes it's the balance of both, and that's what you brought us to, the sense of balance. I don't know if you have one more that you can share with us, one piece of creative that you could leave us with as we close today. I want to invite Paul to share one, but I want to invite the audience really to check out his new book and to, look him up. Look up Paul. He's on, YouTube. He's on all kinds of places you want to see him, but go check him out as well, because Brother Paul is very inspiring that way, and see if he's got something for us right here.
I'll do a little piece. I won't do a full one because most of my poems are like 3-4 minutes. I'll try to do a little bit. This one is from a poem called Four Fathers. And this is looking at my grandfather, my own father, my stepfather, and me as a father. So it's called Four Fathers.
All right.
And it happens on the occurrence of my mother marrying for the second time. I'm 9 years old. My own father was a phantom, a wannabe philosopher who only called when he was inspired. He wrote dense letters packed like cigarettes with epistemology that burned my image of a man into an ashtray. He was not an Indian, but he still couldn't grow a beard or a bank account to save his life. One day, your acquaintances might only be the people who serve you drinks. You will smell like old newspaper and damp corduroy, and you will only be held to account by the poetic solitude of your fatherless insecurities. Because now you have a son, and he wants to walk more like run, hallway to the door, back and forth, but he is not yet one, and his kneecaps are still developing, so he falls and he bangs his head on the hardwood floor, howling at the pain and the fright of falling. I act like nothing happened, as if I can fool him out of his tears. But my son's looking at me like I'm a bully. Something inside me tells me he's right. You see, I could be gone. I could disappear, looking to find myself, the man I was supposed to be, gone looking for God, gone looking out for number one, gone to write my days of solitary adventure, corner stack of dog-eared books, a pot of cold coffee, cigarette smoke, and sandwich meat. Yeah, I could grow a beard. Persuade myself that this is what sacrifice and personal freedom really look like. But I want my son to trust the traits I carry. I want to be present, to pick him up from his howling place. I want him to sympathize and understand what dignity in the place of pride, what responsibility in the place of attitude, what a macho really looks like. So then I kiss his hand, I kiss his knees, and I kiss his feet. So he knows that men can be trusted not to leave too.
Ooh, beautiful, brother. Thank you. Thank you for that medicine right there. As we contemplate how we, with our love, with our kisses, can reach out and, kiss somebody's hand and kiss their knees and kiss their feet in humbleness, in gratitude for what they've given us. And in the humbleness of healing, sometimes we need to bow down that way and embrace somebody, even when they don't feel they deserve it. Mm-hmm. It's all part of that healing journey that we all are on. And brother, I want to thank you for opening us up, for opening that journey for so many, and for your continued work and continued creativity that allows us all to heal. That floricanto that so many have really guided us to embrace. Congratulations on your new book, brother. And, let's keep in connection. I want to just, to the audience out there, reach into yourself with that love that you have. Search for your identity, for those, those places that sometimes, in terms of our own identity, are challenging. But don't feel the need to always be successful in the way the world says it, but search for that balance and that healing, yes, way, brother, and recognize you are a poem, and you get to choose the ending. Yeah. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being with us. Share this podcast and some reflections. Check out Paul's book, and we'll continue this journey in healing generations. Thank you all very much. Claso Camarle.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.